Minister, how do we even know what the needs and the educational needs of children are when they can't access assessment of needs? They're entitled to get an assessment within 3 months and to have the resources provided within a further 3 months, but they're waiting 2 and 3 years for assessments. And this assessment at the outset is key, because if you don't get the assessment, the diagnosis and the resources and supports, then the needs grow and it becomes a much bigger problem for schools and for children and for parents as they enter education. And to give you an example, we had parents in my office in the last couple of weeks who have a young 2-year-old son who is non-verbal, whose paediatrician says he shows all the signs of pretty severe autism, and he applied for an assessment on the 2nd of February. He should have that assessment by now, but he's been told by the HSE. He was linked in with the disability network teams, but that was just a box-ticking exercise. But the HSE have told him that it could be 2 to 3 years before he gets the assessment. 2 to 3 years before, and his parents are absolutely panicked about his future. Now, if he gets his assessment now, gets his diagnosis now, gets the services and support, and that includes an assessment of educational needs, then he will be in a far better position. If he doesn't get them, the problems and his future will be impacted, as well as creating much bigger problems for his education and the school where he may go. So early intervention is absolutely critical, and we are failing disastrously at that level. And indeed, I've raised time and time again the issue of all those young people who are trying to get qualifications, doctorates and so on in educational and counselling psychology, and they can't get qualified because of massive fees that are deterring many of them or preventing many of them getting qualified. So we've loads of young people who want to work with children with special needs, but they're being charged a fortune such that it's very difficult for them to actually qualify. There's no funding whatsoever for educational psychology, postgraduate degrees and doctorates, which is absolutely disgraceful. We give funding to clinical psychology, we don't give it to educational psychology. These are the people we need to make the assessments, to provide the services and so on, and set young people up so they don't have that delayed development worsened, if you like, and their future impacted and then impacting in terms of schools. But then also, I mean, the government will say they have more SNAs than we ever have and so on, but the fact is that the numbers are rising in line with the population growth. They're not actually, we're not, in terms of the actual support levels available, in terms of SNAs and special education teachers, we're not even back to where we were before the austerity cuts of 2008. In real terms, when you look at it proportionately in terms of the SNAs available and the teachers. I also would just like to make a particular mention when we're talking about places and so on, ASD units. I've been campaigning in support of Booterstown National, St Mary's Boys National School in Booterstown, in an area where there is an identified need, and has been for some time, for an ASD unit, and the school has been campaigning to get the parish hall, which the owners of the parish hall are willing to give over for an ASD unit. The government have committed to supporting its acquisition to provide an ASD unit for the school, but despite all the promises, they still don't know, and they're pleading with the government to make sure that acquisition goes through, because they do not know will they have that hall acquired in order to have the ASD unit that they need in September. I'd also just very quickly mention Step Aside Special Education Together, who have a Stepping Stones unit in their school but do not have enough funding in order to staff it properly. And indeed, the failure of the government to provide the resources and staffing for places has now led the government to talk about essentially essentially segregating children, again, rather than mainstreaming them because of the lack of resources, places, supports and staff. That is simply not good enough.